So I think that it's been a strong conversation today. And what we've seen in that conversation is that there's been a lot of progress and quite a lot of matters are settled, but there's still a lot to do. And that's kind of the way it's going to be, I think, over the next 10 years or so. So I wanted to give some reflection on some of that conversation and then to pick out some things that at least seemed quite important to me as I listened during the course of today. The first piece of this is that current conversation from a ZEP perspective is captured in the strategic deployment document, the second of its kind. And I think it would reward your review to have a look at it. I think it's rich in a lot of this content. And it also acknowledges where there are significant amounts of work that still need to be done. I think one of the things it connects with is where Philip Lowe was in his conversation with us this afternoon. And whilst he admitted that 2020 should not be taken literally, it should be within a few years of 2020, the message that he left us with is that we do have to deliver on the milestones we promised by around about that time if we are to get overall permission to drive this programme forward, if we are to have a large-scale deployable industry by that time. So, of course, it's important that we should be able to meet the objectives of the demonstration programme, but also to remember always that the point of the demonstration programme is to prepare us for the deployment that comes after that, and that we still need substantial, urgent action to achieve it. So, how can we achieve a successful and timely CCS demonstration programme? So it seems to us, as always, that we come back to a graphic we've seen before. The first piece of this is that we know we need to validate the technology. That, of course, is always a key part of the storyline. But in many senses, it's the piece which is most within the control of the participants. We understand this piece very well. We also know that we need to bring down the costs, because it is clear, particularly in the context of today's instruments, that we wouldn't deploy today's CCS technology at the current costs. And then the long conversation that we've had at various points during the day about the public awareness piece. So it's clear that the focus there should be on the transportation and on the storage, and that's emerged from a number of these conversations. And the point's been made, therefore, that as we choose the demonstration projects, we should work with those that can contribute to the outcome. And therefore, it would be unhelpful, I believe at least, if all of those projects took place in places where there were no folk. We need to grapple with the issue of what folk do when they are asked to indeed put some of this in something that is at least close to their backyard. I think this point that's been made about the openness of the dialogue to achieve that is critical, and the advice that we've been given that it is indeed obviously site-specific and perhaps rather more transactional in nature than the overarching way in which we've tried to persuade people to date is of critical importance and good insight for me during the course of today. So, of course, it remains particularly important that we should establish regulatory frameworks, and the transposition is underway in many places, and it may take place at different points in different regimes. I understand that. It's clear that those that get the transposition done fastest will be in pole position to deliver on the demonstration programme, I believe enhance the competitiveness of their own industries and thereby benefit from the overall funding that's available. It's also clear that we still need to do work to close the funding gap. The NER 300 is an important part of the process, which has been primed by the EEPR, but we know that member state funding is absolutely critical for delivering this first phase of demonstrations. It was good to hear from some of those member states during the course of today that they remain on course and committed in order to deliver this. In effect, those demonstrations must all be in place with their funding by the end of 2011. Otherwise, the whole programme, with its contingent difficulties and its need to get to boards with risks resolved at a level which is acceptable by about the end of 2011, otherwise you don't get up and running around about 2015, becomes clear. You know, at this point I always say if the metaphor is inappropriate, I apologise, but it means that we must keep the pedal to the metal. There is no time to relax. It is clear that there are multiple challenges. We talk a lot about the demonstration programme and about the need for further phases of technology development beyond that. For me, at least, it's important that these things remain connected. That is, that the R&D that we are doing to create new opportunities is informed by the performance of the current technologies in the demonstrations, and to the extent that it can alter and improve performances is applied within them. They're not disconnected activities. We need to prioritise those R&D projects which will assist that learning by doing activity, and we need to make sure that we fully support the framework programmes and the Strategic Energy Technology Plan to deliver that. Those of you who've heard me on this before know that I believe, and I said so earlier, there will be fewer projects than we might have imagined 1 or 2 years ago, but I imagine they will be stronger projects given the nature of the challenge. What I think that means is that we must have a clear and effective knowledge-sharing approach. The platform has given key advice on this in its document at the end of last year, and we continue to believe that that is groundbreaking advice which covers the needs of multiple stakeholders and is an effective means for delivering the maximum knowledge sharing that will be required with perhaps fewer projects. But this should not only be done in an EU context. It's particularly pleasing to see the United States here today, and that we would want to open a conversation, perhaps out of the project network, over how we can have a broader knowledge sharing activity so that we maximise that learning on a global basis. We can then launch CCS on that critical path towards deployment, but it can only be achieved, as we've already said, with that explicit and implicit public support. So, again, reflecting on that message that it's a more transactional approach which may deliver the most benefits, which are very much site-specific, and that we need to work hard if we are to achieve this. Accelerating the widespread deployment, then, is, of course, dependent on the world's demo programme, but behind that, we want that single objective of deployable technology from 2020 or so onwards. And this demands that the set of specific stakeholders all deliver on a number of crucial deliverables. That it is important to see this as a collaboration between all of the institutions, between government, between the public, and between industry, which focuses on the challenges as they arrive and has the right roles for each member of that partnership in delivering progress against them. Most of these are issues that have been raised during the course of the day, but it does seem important to extend the matter of CCS to industrial sectors beyond power. It seems important to talk about biomass co-firing and the opportunity to go, as Frederick would say, carbon negative. What I think we also heard in the context of the EU's planning over this period is how important long-term infrastructure is, and the need to have European-wide solutions for infrastructure because they reduce costs, and that very specifically and clearly has to include the infrastructure for CCS. Given that CCS is not commercially viable today, we know that funding schemes will be necessary. We heard some conversation around how that might be done. We heard some conversation around the central role here in Europe of the ETS, and that seems to be rather important, but that there would also need to be augmented in some way. and the ZEP as a platform needs to work over the next 6 months or so on what sorts of policies may particularly assist in that delivery. It also seems to have been important from a number of the correspondents today to get an overall price of CO2 as pervasively as possible. But we also pragmatically need to work in worlds where there may be key countries or key places which don't have a price, at least not an explicit price. It will also be important to have CCS finally recognised in Cancun as a key mitigation strategy by the UNFCCC, and ideally whatever financial mechanisms should be recommended by those who meet at that time, perhaps even including the CDM, should include CCS as part of the way forward. It also seems important that we accelerate the delivery of the second and third generations of technology. We also need to understand how CCS interacts with other opportunities like hydrogen production and geothermal, maximise international collaboration, and see this in the overarching 2050 energy scenario, and in particular given our role in the emerging roadmap from DG Energy, which will be part of the 2011 programme. It then seems critically important that we continue to make the case that CCS is value for money, particularly in these recessionary times, that it has applicability beyond some of the narrow confines to which it has been placed historically, and that it is, I believe at least, clearly true that there is no single solution, no silver bullet in the context of delivering on our climate change objectives. It is an and story. But I at least profoundly believe that without CCS, it will be extremely difficult to deliver on those objectives, and it will be extremely expensive. And that's why it's so important that we remain clearly focused on delivery of the objectives of the European flagship programme in that broader global context, whilst focusing on doing the doable around the real set of strong projects which will emerge as a result of this first phase of NER 300 funding. So I wanted to finish with a thought process that says it is very often the case here that we are the first out of the gate, the first to start, the first to recognise the issue. And the question, as always for us, is can we also be first across the finishing line? Can we, with apologies to those who are from outside our region, maintain the competitiveness of Europe and actually deliver this so that it's a major industrial opportunity in addition to a climate change opportunity and a climate change solution? So we know that the national implementation of the directives will be critical. We need to keep the pressure on. We know that we need to sort out the funding matters. We need to keep the pressure on. We know that we need political and public support. We need to keep the pressure on. We know that international collaboration is essential. We need to keep the pressure on, however difficult it seems. We won't get a second chance at this. If it takes a decade to sort this out, and we only have a decade to sort it out in, there simply won't be a second chance. And time is ticking. We need to keep the pedal to the metal. Thank you for your attention.